Hey everyone, my name is Tom Footet. I'm the product guy from Accedian, and I'll walk a little bit through what Skylight is for service assurance and talk a little bit about how we're working with the Cisco Crosswork platform with CNC and with NSO. We good? Audio's good? We're good. All right. So we'll start a little bit talking about Accedian Skylight, what our product is, what it does, why you should possibly care about it. And really what we try and focus on is end-to-end visibility, right? So our sort of thesis of our product of Skylight is that packets don't lie, right? If you push packets through the network and look at how they behave, that's a true reflection of what's happening to end customer experience, right? That is the end customer experience in effect, right? So if you build continuous streams of packets through the network and you watch how those continuous streams of packets behave across different services, and you can sort of get an individual sort of service level view of how a service is behaving, but also an aggregate view of how the network is behaving and what customer experience looks like. And so we basically try and collect all these statistics from the network and then sort of bring all that data back into one place to combine it with other sources of performance data potentially, and learn about what's happening in your network, and then be able to try and more quickly determine what the root cause might be. And so and also potentially look at predictive, right? Not only what's happened in the past, what's happening now, but also what might be happening in the future. So in other words, I can help understand congestion issues before they occur, for example, and so on. If you look at why my slides won't advance, if you look at what we do, right, like why is our performance data useful for understanding these things, right? So we do very high granularity data, right? So we do sub-second sampling, right? So you can get down a millisecond level of accuracy of what's happening in the network, and you can get microsecond level precision. We do one-way metrics, so upstream and downstream separately, right? And so the idea is that you're going to get a detailed view of the behavior of the network. The challenge with a lot of metrics produced at the router, for example, or with some other tools, is that you're looking at 5-minute or 15-minute averages, right? And the issue with that is that it tends to smooth out issues in the network, right? So it's less about is the network down, it's about is the network having transient issues that are impacting customer experience, right? So Kayla likes to say slow is the new down, right? So the idea is that if you're getting impacts on your services, you want to understand those detailed transient level impacts, right? So you want to have this millisecond level reporting and microsecond level accuracy if you're looking at a 5G low latency service, right? Or if you're having things like, hey, I'm having a failover and it's not converging within 50 milliseconds and I'm getting some packet loss, right? Those are things that might be happening for only a few milliseconds in your network, right? But it might have a real impact, right? Those dropouts can cause impact on real-time services. They can have an impact on customer experience. And so by looking at that very detailed level network data, you can really get a clear view of what's happening in your network. And for us, this is a really powerful way of looking at the user experience, and then you can combine that with the rest of what's happening in your network in Crosswork, right, to be able to get a comprehensive view. And we'll talk about how they work together in just a second. So we support a variety of different kinds of protocols, right? Whether it's service activation testing, whether it's about active testing using standards-based protocols like TWAMP or Y1731. We support bandwidth monitoring. We support analyzing user traffic as well as generating our own synthetic traffic. And we have a variety of what we call sensors that you can put in the network, right, that do this. And you can put those sensors all over the place. So we have a sensor, it's a probe, in other words, right? But it's a sensor, it's a Docker container. We have ones that are a smart SFP. We have a variety of different form factors. So you can deploy software or hardware throughout the network. And whether that's in the cloud, in the backbone and core, and an aggregation network at endpoints, right? You can place these sensors throughout the network. And because we have this variety of form factors, it means that we can put the sensors pretty much anywhere, right? And so that allows us, when you're doing synthetic or active testing, you can put different places to actuate or generate the packets from. And then you can use our sensors to also reflect the packets. And of course, when you're using a standards-based protocol, you can also have a standards-based reflector, right? So you might have like a node B in a mobile network that's got a T1 reflector on it, so we can bounce packets off of that, right? So between our different kinds of sensors you can use to actuate and reflect synthetic tests and the standards-based reflectors in the network, you can basically build a mesh of testing capability throughout your network, right? So you might be looking at a service level, like looking at the performance of a specific like L3 VPN or whatever else, or you might be looking at like end-to-end from AWS to a node B or AWS to a customer site or whatever else to be able to understand the sort of the end-to-end performance of the network. And we have more than 400 metrics that we generate across a variety of different protocols, right, to be able to do that. And again, when we're doing analysis, it's not just like, hey, what's the average delay, right? We're not doing like large time series averaging, right? We do a lot of packets per second, and we do build a statistical analysis. So it's not just an average; it's percentiles, standard deviation. And like I said, we produce metrics that are one way, right? So upstream and downstream are different metrics. Most networks, the behavior of the network is asymmetrical, right? Most of the time, if you look at a mobile network, and most of the traffic's going down, not up, right? Most networks have an asymmetrical behavior to them, and so understanding the performance in both directions is also quite critical. And then obviously you want to try and make sense of all this data. So we put these probes or sensors in the network, we're generating all this information, we're collecting it all, and how do we make sense of that information, right? So obviously, when you're generating all this data in our network, we have many customers that are generating what amounts to billions of data points a day, right? It's very high accuracy, high granularity. We usually do like anywhere from 1 second to 1 minute reporting of the data with all these percentiles and everything else. It's a lot of data points, right? So I think I did a calculation and we had like one of our sort of European national customers was generating like 5 billion data points from their network a day from our solution, right? So it's a lot of data, right? So how do I try and make sense of that, right? And so basically we have a solution that collects all this data and then tries to help you make sense of it a little bit, right? And analyze that telemetry at scale. And we leverage some machine learning algorithms to be able to do correlation, anomaly detection, pattern matching, basically some statistical and machine learning techniques to be able to try and extract relevant insight out of that data, and then be able to use that to say, okay, so what, right? So this is things like being able to predict congestion in the network before it occurs, and be able to understand the behavior of the network in a meaningful way at a high level, and then be able to drill down and see a specific issue at a detailed level. And this solution is cloud native. It's also multi-tenanted, so you can use it for like an operations team who wants to or a network engineering team who want to look at the network, inside the customer, inside the operator. But we also have customers that use it to position performance data externally as well, right? So customize our user interface to be able to share data with their actual end customers instead of just sharing it with like a network operations team or an engineering team and so on and so forth as well. And all this is all customizable, right? So I'll show a little bit of a demo later, but it's all fully customizable, and you can build your dashboards, your analysis views, the machine learning techniques you're using. This can be all customized in the solution to be able to allow you to get the views you want. So operations, engineering, the NOC, planning, a customer portal. They might want all different kinds of views of all this data, right? So it's all cool data. We have all these different techniques to bring insight out of it, but different teams have different pieces of data and want to do different things with it, and so it can all be customized out of the box by an end user to be able to get the view that you want. And that's this example of again, I'll show a little bit of a demo a little bit later, but you can see that you can build various graphical representations of this, various different views of the analysis, and so on and so forth. And again, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, right? So, what's the advantage of doing it this way, right? So, the idea is that you want to get high granularity data, right down to the microsecond level accuracy, millisecond level, sampling, no gaps in visibility, right? The hard to solve problems are not, we were down for 8 hours, right? The hard to solve problems is, hey, I'm having like this service that's like cutting out every once in a while, like, that my voice call dropped, something happened here, right? But it's not like a consistent issue. What's going on? Being able to see down in the network and see small issues is really critical. And so being able to have that level of visibility and that level of timing sensitivity is important, right? And it's a service level view, right? So when we do this testing, we generate synthetic packets that are used to emulate real user traffic, right? So VLAN, DSCP value, other cross markings, and packet size, and so on and so forth are all configurable so that you can make our test traffic look like user traffic and at an upper plane. Even if you're testing at layer 3, you can use tests that simulate higher level applications even at layer 3, and so the network reacts the same way as it would to user traffic. I think someone in the previous session asked, well, hey, could I run a ping? Well, that's great, except that how the network's going to treat a ping is very different than how it's going to treat a low priority versus high priority data traffic, right? And so you want to test in a way that it has the network condition the test traffic the same way as the user traffic, right? An ICMP echo is pretty useless for that, right? And so the idea is you want to be able to get that user experience level view, right? Having the network treat the synthetic test packets the same way that it would treat user data. Obviously, you need it to be scalable, right? We have customers that are running close to like 1 million concurrent tests in their network at once, right? So you want to be able to run a lot of mesh testing through your network to get all this visibility. And vendor agnostic is important as well, right? So we're a Cisco partner, and my demo I'm going to show is got the Cisco user interface, and I'm going to talk about how we're integrating with NSO and planning on integrating with CNC, and I know Paola talked a little bit about this yesterday as well if you were in her session. And so that we're working closely with Cisco, but obviously it's a heterogeneous network, and our solution is designed to work across and does work across multi-vendor. And be able to be very, again, programmable, and we'll talk about the programmability in just a second as well. And really when we talk about to sort of bring it back around to what I was talking about at the beginning, right? The our point of view, the Accedian point of view, which you can take with a grain of salt because I work for Accedian, but is that it works best when you start looking at things with the packets, right? Again, the packets in the network, if you generate test traffic that is like the user's traffic, that looking at how those packets behave gets you a reflection of the user experience. If you start with that and then drill down into the underlying infrastructure, it really helps say, okay, versus doing it the other way around, it helps understand the perspective of a user experience from the user's perspective first. In other words, if there's a device having an issue in the network, is it impacting the user or not? If it's impacting the user, you want to fix it right away. If it's not impacting the user, maybe it's of less importance, right? So our whole idea is start with the packets, right? Start with a synthetic test, start with the packets, understand the behavior, and then drill down, right? Don't start from the box out, starts from the user experience and work in. All right, so that's enough about our stuff. So we're at developer days, and so we want to talk a little bit about automating this, right? And so we've had APIs on our solution since it was designed, right? But we've been working closely with the Cisco team, with NSO and with CNC about how do we incorporate our platform into, and our platform is called Skylight, incorporating Skylight into NSO and incorporating it into CNC to be able to leverage their automation capabilities and share data and so on and so forth. So, why do we want to automate visibility or assurance in the first place, right? I think someone, maybe yourself, asked a question earlier, like, when this, well, when you set up a session with CNC, wouldn't you just want to set up the visibility at the same time? I can't remember who it was. Someone asked that in the last session, right? And really, that's the whole point, right? You want to be able to set this up automatically, right? Well, why? Well, again, our whole thesis isn't about running this as a one-off troubleshooting thing, right? You don't start putting these packets in the network when you think you have a problem. You put the packets in the network so that you can understand the history of a problem, you can predict problems, right? So it's not about testing, it's about assuring, right? So we want continuous visibility. We want these test packets to be going through the network all the time. And so if that's the case, well, networks aren't static, obviously, right? Your network changes, services in the network change, right? So you're going to want to be able to, automate the provisioning of the assurance so that it stays as a true reflection of the network, right? And so basically the whole point is intent-based networks require intent-based assurance, right? I want to be able to tell the assurance solution, tell our solution, hey, this is what I want the network to look like. Please assure it and let me know when you're having a problem as I set it up. So that's really the whole point, right? That's the intent-based assurance. So when we talk about this loop of intent-based networking, right? There's the assurance loop. Now, obviously, we're not the only link in that chain, right? There are other tools in the Crosswork portfolio that help with that assurance chain, but we see ourselves as a link in that chain, right? That assurance link that helps, when you define a service, you implement a service, and then basically tell us about that service and what you want to monitor, and we'll let you know when something goes wrong. That's kind of the idea behind this intent-based assurance. Okay, I think I'm still doing okay on time. So let's talk a little bit about how. How does this work? How do we get Skylight to work with NSO or with CNC? And so basically we have, in our solution, we have what we call sensors, right? And so sensors, again, are probes. They're basically what you put in the network. Again, we have software modules, like a VM image, we have a Docker container, we have a smart SFP, right? So we have a variety of sensors. These things go in the network, right? They get plugged into a router, they get put on an x86 server, they get installed in AWS, they get put somewhere, right? And then, we have our analytics platform that is able to analyze and look at this data, right? But basically, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to provision, those sensors when you provision a service in your network or change your network, and you want to be able to extract data from that and be able to pull it back out again, right? So the goal is to be able to sort of have Crosswork there to be able to do that, right? And then, and then obviously be able to use Crosswork to take action in the network as a result of that assurance, and we can share data between the two platforms as well, right? So be able to share data between Crosswork and Skylight. So we can provide data to Skylight. We can also take data from CDG, and so that's kind of the idea, right? So drilling down a level from there. We have a NED with a RESTConf interface, Yang model. Our Yang models are published on GitHub, and basically we support an interface into Skylight to be able to provision, a test or set of tests as part of your NSO provisioning workflow. And I'll show a little demo. One of the Cisco TMEs recorded a demo of this, and I'll show it in a few minutes. But basically the idea is you can use a NED to be able to do that. So we have a NED for Accedian and for Skylight, and you can include that in your automation workflow when you build that. It's still in POC stage, but we're also integrating with CNC. So if you're at the previous session, you saw, how you can build this assurance graph, right? You can include Skylight data in that assurance graph, right? So you can basically, when you set up that L3 VPN service, you can enable Skylight probing through that assurance graph, and then we use GNMI feedback through CDG to be able to share some of the data, not all of it, but some of the data back with CNC, so that you can include Skylight assurance data in that assurance graph, right? So again, if you were in that previous session, you saw that, collecting some metrics on an L2 VPN, but we can include, our probing with that as well. Again, that's in a POC phase right now, but it's something that's coming. That integration is coming along, and that's something we want to be able to help include with the Network Insights Service Health in Skylight or in CNC. Yeah.
Do you support also sending probes to Health Insights? So outside of the Service Health application of CNC, can we just use individual probes as a custom defined KPI that we can use further to take an action?
So right now the sort of the two-pronged approach we're taking, the NSO one is really the way that's a little bit more customizable through the NED. The configuration through the CNC one is a little bit more fixed right now. I think Paula is there, but I think the idea is we want to expand that a little bit more over time. The initial integration is a little bit more on the rails, let's say, but with the NSO NED, if you want to use the NSO approach directly, you can use NSO, and we have a NED that supports a more customization, I guess, via the NSO approach. Yes, that's correct. Actually, that's right on the next slide.
That is correct, right? We have so CDG can actually forward raw data to a Kafka bus, right? And then they have a Skylight subscribing to the Kafka bus, and they can actually consume.
Yeah, correct. Correct. Yes, exactly. So we'll talk. That's essentially the flow, right? So what we want to do, I'll try not to walk too far. What we want to basically be able to do is be able to drive change. So if you look at like the NED, for example, on NSO, right, we can feedback alerts. From so you can set up like a session here, like say, okay, I want to test this. We can also set up like thresholds, pre-configured or dynamically set up thresholds. It can be fixed thresholds or based on like delay or variation from normal. We can do some machine learning here and then pass back an alert that you can use to take action, right? So the goal is not only to be able to set this up, but also be able to use the results, right? So whether it's in CNC in that assurance graph, right, or with NSO to be able to, automate change in the network. The goal there is to be able to share that data between the platforms and be able to take action when we see events happening in the network. Yeah.
And they just need some analytic solutions someplace where they have dashboards and so on. Does anyone do that? Treat analytics as a separate product.
Yeah, so you can do that, right? So technically speaking, and you can sort of see this in my diagram, right? This is, if you just didn't install this piece, right? Obviously, we don't have any of our probe data to share with CNC and so on, but you could have another data source, either from CDG or just directly from another data source, right? So we do have customers that do it that way, right? So basically, they say, hey, either exclusively or for some services, they want to use some existing telemetry from some source. Right, so like we have a large tier 1 in the U.S. that deploys our solution that way, right? Where they basically just they had a telemetry source they already wanted to use. They didn't buy my packet first approach. Yeah, I think that's pretty good, but not everyone agrees, or maybe they don't agree right away. So you can use the platform with. You don't have to use it with our data sources. Essentially, what it comes down to is that this was built to be agnostic of the data source. So in other words, our probe data isn't any different than a telemetry data we get from CDG or directly from a device in the network or from an SD-WAN device or whatever else, right? There's nothing specifically special about our probe data from the point of view of this layer. It looks like a time series information like anything else. So anything I talk about is really doable regardless. Okay. So that was my last sort of, how does it work slide, right? So again, we have a NED, you can integrate and automate with NSO. This is still POC, but we're building this integration with CNC and CDG. And then again, you can lay in other sources of data, either directly from CDG, right? Or directly from the source itself if it's not a data source that CDG collects, or if you don't have CDG deployed for some reason, then you have an option to collect data directly, right? So we have deployments, like you said, that are only that. We have deployments that are just our probes, and we have deployments that are a mix of both out in the field. Hopefully I'm not wandering too much off my X here. I gotta make sure I'm good. Yeah. So again, the idea here is the end result is that you can use NSO or CNC or both to basically work with Skylight to automate provisioning of service assurance, right? So in other words, assurance and service provisioning and network automation exist at the same layer. Traditionally, a lot of customers did these things independently of each other, right? You built a network, you built some automation in the network, and then a different team came along and tried to build assurance in the network, and those things maybe never synchronized very well, right? And we have a lot of customers who had, with our solution, had struggled with, okay, how do I get this automated in a way that when I change the network, the assurance changes at the same time? And so leveraging Crosswork and NSO to be able to do that is, I think, a very good best practice, right? It helps make sure that the assurance you build in the network reflects the state of the network, right? And so that's on the provisioning side. On the collection side, again, right, we talked about leveraging our data into the CNC assurance graph, right, being able to collect alerts back into NSO, right? So we can take action. We can share the data and be part of the assurance graph in CNC. We can share the data, share alerts, and take action in NSO to be able to make changes in the network. And we can use our platform to do a deeper analysis, right? So be able to look in the data and help understand what's going on and see what's happening in the network. I do have a quick demo. It's recorded. I didn't do it. Actually, one of the Cisco TMEs did it, and it's a demo of using our solution from NSO. So I'm not going to show the whole video. A, I think it would be all about time, and B, I don't think you want to sit there and watch a video with no sound, but I'll try and narrate a little bit. So the goal here is that when you provision a service this is using NSO, right? So if you're provisioning a service from NSO, you can use Skylight. So you can set Skylight up using the NED, and you can configure it, right? And so we have a variety of different types of tests that we support, right? And so you can use NSO to build configurations for those tests. So in this case, it's actually looking at showing you the currently running sessions of various types. There's only a handful. This is obviously a lab system, right? But then you can go, let me see, I'll fast forward a little bit. Oh, yeah, and then you can go and configure different parameters for them, right? So these are parameters that you would pass to the NED, either parameterized or fixed parameters you might configure for different types of tests. So I think this one's a TWAMP test, so it's a bit small on my screen, right? So you can set that up. And so when you go to provision, you can go do that. So I will fast forward a little bit here, and because I don't need to look at the details of that. And this is our user interface. So we have a version of our user interface. So let's get it to load all the way here. It was a real demo, so it took a second to load the screen. There we go. Now it's still loading. There it is. So this is a version of our user interface that we actually have branded with the Cisco logo on it. So you can customize our UI to change the color and the logo and stuff like that. So we did a version with the Cisco logo on it. When we're doing partner demos with Cisco, it looks good. And so our UI is very customizable as well. So you could do an Accedian version of this, you can do a Cisco version, or if you're using it with a customer portal, a service provider can put their own branding on the user interface as well. It's all configurable. So this is just a version with Cisco branding on it. This is Skylight, right? So this is a dashboard that was built, right? And with a variety of metrics on it. I'll play it while I'm talking a little bit, right? So you can see some stuff is stopped here. Some of the data is stopped because the test is stopped, and we'll show using NSO to sort of start it up again. But the idea is you can build, these are all customizable. So the story I always like to say is, this dashboard, I could delete it and recreate it again in 5 minutes, right? It's user customizable. You can click and drag and drop to build views of the data. So it's all user customizable. And you can, so you can build data dashboards from a variety of widgets. You can put maps, you can put all sorts of good stuff all over it. In this case, it's just showing that there were some tests running across the various classes of service. So best effort, high priority, and higher priority traffic. And so the tests are stopped right now. You can see there's a no traffic for some of that, but you can basically look at those different classes of service, drill down, see the specific class of service. And this demo has actually got a combination of our assurance data. It's also got some telemetry from the router coming in as well, right? So this demo workflow, as it proceeds along, you'll notice some data in this dashboard that's also showing data coming from telemetry from the router, right? So it's actually got some telemetry coming from the router into the same dashboard. So this is an example of showing data coming from like CDG into our platform, as well as data coming from our probes as well. And you can drill down and build a variety of visualizations if you want, and I won't drill into that too much just for the sake of time. What I will do is show that you can. Of course, I screwed that up. Try and do this a little bit faster. So the other thing you can do, of course, is when you're going to create a service in NSO, right? The idea is that you can basically build provisioning of the assurance right into the workflow, right? So this is someone setting up an L3 VPN, right? And then you can see you can add the Accedian piece in there, right? And configure the parameters you want to configure attached for that service, right? And so this is still setting up the L3 VPN, and then you can configure the service assurance parameters in there as well, which are the parameters you set up in the first place for the NED. And then I'll fast forward a little bit through this process. We're setting up the Accedian parameters, and then in a second, you'll start to see the data flow in again, right? So we for the purpose of the demo, we had it running, we stopped it, and we set it up again, and then in a second here, you'll see the data start to flow through again. Well, there you go. I fast forward a little bit, right? So it takes a minute, but the data source starts showing up again, right? So the goal being that basically, you're able to automate that provisioning workflow right through. Right, so you can basically use NSO to do that, and then as I mentioned, we support RESTConf alerts. So as part of that provisioning workflow, you could say, hey, I have an SLA for the stuff I'm monitoring. I can configure those SLA parameters in the same provisioning workflow, and then take an alert back when those SLAs are breached, for example, and take an action. All right. So that's a quick run through, knowing that I'm just about out of time. So. We do have a lot of great documentation online. Our API documentation is online as well if you want to look at our APIs. So some of the automation that we showed is sort of the tip of the iceberg and what you can do. We've got a lot of great APIs, and the platform is designed to support automation. And you can find me at one of those locations or here this afternoon if you want to talk some more. So I will stop there. If there are any last minute questions, we're good.